Coming up next, it's Batman, followed by The Real Adventures of Johnny Quest on Cartoon Network. Coming up next, it's The Real Adventures of Johnny Quest, followed by The Flintstones on Cartoon Network.
Coming up next, it's The Flintstones, followed by Bugs and Daffy on Cartoon Network. Coming up next, it's the Bugs and Daffy Show, followed by Tom and Jerry on Cartoon Network. Coming up next, it's Tom and Jerry, followed by Scooby-Doo on Cartoon Network. Coming up next, it's Scooby-Doo, followed by the Rocky and Bullwinkle Show on Cartoon Network. Coming up next, it's the Rocky and Bullwinkle Show on Cartoon Network. Coming up next, it's Wait Till Your Father Gets Home, followed by Speed Racer. Coming up next, it's Speed Racer, followed by Popeye on Cartoon Network. Coming up next, it's Popeye, followed by Top Cat on Cartoon Network. Coming up next, it's Top Cat, followed by Yogi Bear on Cartoon Network. Coming up next, it's Yogi Bear, followed by Cartoon-a-Doodle-Doo on Cartoon Network. Coming up next, it's Tom and Jerry Kids, followed by Alvin and the Chipmunks on Cartoon Network. Coming up next, it's the Flintstones, followed by the Jetsons on Cartoon Network. Coming up next, it's the Jetsons, followed by Scooby-Doo on Cartoon Network. Coming up next, it's Scooby-Doo, followed by the Acme Hour on Cartoon Network. Coming up next, Scooby-Doo continues, followed by the Acme Hour on Cartoon Network. Coming up next, it's the Acme Hour, followed by the Super Friends on Cartoon Network. Coming up next, it's the Super Friends, followed by Godzilla on Cartoon Network.
Coming up next, it's Godzilla, followed by Toonami on Cartoon Network. Coming up next, it's Toonami, followed by Batman on Cartoon Network.
Coming up next, it's Batman, followed by Beetlejuice on Cartoon Network. Coming up next, it's Beetlejuice, followed by Freakazoid on Cartoon Network. Coming up next, it's Freakazoid, followed by Scooby-Doo on Cartoon Network. Coming up next, it's Scooby-Doo, followed by Dexter's Laboratory on Cartoon Network. Coming up next, it's Dexter's Laboratory, followed by Cow and Chicken on Cartoon Network. Coming up next, it's Cow and Chicken on Cartoon Network.
Coming up next, it's Johnny Bravo on Cartoon Network.
Coming up next, it's Cartoon Planet, followed by Space Goes Coast to Coast on Cartoon Network. Coming up next, it's Space Ghost Coast to Coast, followed by Gumby on Cartoon Network.